Hello everyone, welcome once again to the Final Fantasy Rebirth Hour, or the cardboard box item, depending on what platform you are listening to. My name is Steve, and I'm joined by the prestigious, the lovable, the charming Michael Pender. How are you today, Michael?
If tiredness was alcohol, I would be drunk right now, and it speaks to how tired I am that it took me so long to articulate that sentence. When it's actually a very simple sentence.
I wasn't going to say anything. And, of course, that is the perfect time to record a 3-hour podcast, which is how long I assume this podcast is going to be.
Probably, yeah. No, it's just weird. I think the last episode I had a cold, so there's always going to be something. I'm going to be dead.
No, you'll lose a leg or something for your last one. Yeah. Well, that would be very thematically appropriate, I suppose, going into the last one. True. But no spoilers there. So we have been talking about Final Fantasy Rebirth. Unlike Final Fantasy Remake, which we could basically cover in one very long podcast, we've been forced to kind of split this one up into 4 sections because it's at least 4 times as big, probably more. It's a bloody huge game. They did not skimp on content. The last time, in our last episode on this, we got as far as the Coral Prison, and we left it there, which is the midpoint between chapter 8, but it's a fairly big tonal shift at that point, so it felt like an appropriate place to leave it. So, once we get kicked out of the gold... Well, we're not kicked out. We're actually sent out into the prison to find the man with the gun arm. And pretty much the first thing that happens is we get kidnapped by a new character in this game. And I think we have to talk about because he's a very interesting one, Gus. Yeah. Gus is Jersey Shore meets, I don't know...
I thought of him as almost like, do you know those sort of stock market bros? He's always talking about Gil and like swearing a lot and has like 1,000% too much confidence.
Gold teeth and everything.
Was he in the original game? He wasn't.
No,
sure.
No.
Yeah.
I mean, I think there's a guy actually. Now, we'll probably, if this is true, this will probably show up on screen. But I remember in the original game, there's a guy who's guarding the elevator that leads up to the gold saucer again. And I think that might be who Gus is based on. You only interact with him like once in the actual main story, but you can talk to him outside of that as well. So he's not really like a central player in the original game, but obviously they've expanded him much more in this. And
he gets his own fucking team song in this. It's insane.
Yeah, he's a big deal. He's kind of, I guess the closest analog is he's the Don Corneo of this game in a way. Even though Don Corneo does show up later, he kind of fills that role. Whereas in Remake, Don Corneo was he represented the seedy underbelly of Midgar. This was kind of reminding us that seediness is still present out in the open world. A lot of this game takes place out in nature. It's very beautiful. And, this just kind of reminds us that in towns and settlements like this, that seediness, that danger is still very much there, I think.
And I think that's really important as well, because it's sort of what makes Final Fantasy VII interesting in terms of the lineage of the series. And like contemporary games when it was originally made, is like it had that sort of quote unquote more adult content, and like obviously influenced by cyberpunk media, and that sometimes delves into like seedier areas of cities, etc. And I'm really glad they didn't like some of it does get sanitized a little bit, but they didn't shy away from it to the point where sometimes they overcorrect and make it too dark, sometimes without meaning.
There's a side quest that I'm thinking of that I think you might be thinking of the same one that happens later here.
I'm definitely not thinking of that because I've forgotten whatever you're talking about. What I'm talking about is Gus at the end of his big spiel at the beginning where he's like, you're going to win me a chocobo race and you're going to get me all the Gil. He he puts all your party into a cage, which is like ridiculous because there's like 3 guys there and you've defeated like dragons and stuff like that. But anyway, let's just play along. He puts these in cages and then says something along the lines of, Cloud, if you don't win that race and get me that gill, I'll find other ways to make the money. And it's very pointedly looks at Tifa, Ares, and Yuffie.
Yes.
Implying that he's going to sell him for prostitution, which is dark enough. But then he looks at Red and fucking Kate Sit and says, you can put a price on anything. And it's like, are you going to let people have sex with them? Is that...
I didn't read that way, but okay. I mean, I the way I saw that was going to be more like, okay, you're going to be a little plaything for someone. Like they turn Red 13 into an exotic pet for somebody or something like that. And,
let's ignore what I said then, because that's horrible and dark. Okay, cool.
But the thing is, you're not wrong, because this is something that they emphasize here. Skipping ahead a little bit, there's a point later in the game where side quests open up again on every single map. And one of the side quests in Coral Prison is, what's his name from the first one? Do you remember the guy? He was like Don Corneo's kind of assistant who was secretly against him. I've forgotten his name. I might try and insert this again later. But basically, he's chasing down his sister to here. And there's a side quest basically where you have to fight in the arena that is here and to get her back. And... whereas here it's strongly implied that Gus is going to sell those girls into prostitution. Here it's like she was in prostitution. She was forced to do terrible things, and it's way darker than that bit. And like, it's so strange that it's a side quest, that it's a... I think they handled it quite well, because I'm glad that element of darkness is there, but it doesn't infiltrate into the main story. It's there if you look for it. Because I don't think if it was a central part of the main story, it might be too dark. But they managed to push, just with that inference, when they focus on Tifa and Aerith, that's enough for the main story. But you can search further and see that there's more to it if you want to.
Yeah, it's such a difficult balancing act. And like, it's sort of a minor miracle that they do get the tone to mostly work throughout the game. With some exceptions, obviously, and we've mentioned some of them already, I think. But
well, tonally, I think this game is a bit all over the place. I think it's 50-50. Like, sometimes they do it right, but sometimes it's way off. But the thing is, because that's part of the charm of it, how absolutely insanely... Because the original game was like that too. We like to think it wasn't, but it was. You'd have...
It definitely was,
you know, Chocobo Racing versus, like, full... planet genocide, like hand in hand, basically. So yeah, I mean, that's kind of in sync with what's going on here.
It's weird. It almost like I think I remember there was one point in the game. It was when Kate or Red 13 comes in the Shinra uniform and does Michael Jackson dances. That's the point where I was like, whatever this game throws at me is fine. It can't upset the suspension of disbelief, because it's just gone, so it doesn't matter, you know.
And this is the thing, like, I mean, it's because I do lament a little bit, like, how the tension is kind of gone out of a lot of the game. Like, they work very hard to maintain some of it, but it's nowhere near the same level of dramatic tension that was in the original game. The original game did a better job of balancing it, but this is a game of excess. And because of that, the excess is very much in favor of the looniness as opposed to the actual drama. And for that reason, the drama suffers in this game. But yeah, I do kind of lament that that's missing in it. I love the wackiness. Like, I didn't think I would, but I do. I think it's amazing. It's so, like, off the wall. That's really just very, very charming. But it comes at a cost, which sucks.
Yeah.
Yeah, so while they're down in Coral Prison, I mentioned in the last one that I wasn't happy with the way they portrayed Coral Prison, whereas in the original game, like, this was like a mood piece. This was like, the soundtrack did a lot of the heavy lifting there. It was just, this is a place where people pretty much come to die. And that's kind of lost in this one because, like, there's a thriving economy down here. And, you know, there's bars, there's like stuff to do if you get bored. That's not in the original game. That's not the case. Like, it is.
It's
literally
like a fun little village where people are like, there's weird elements and like a lot of like ne'er-do-wells around, but like it seems like a fucking cool place to live in a lot of ways, and people are thriving
Yeah.
in other ways. So it's the original is so potent. Like, you're right, the music plays such a big part of that, and like the shimmery haze, you feel the heat in the original so thoroughly. But yeah, again, it's that problem we've talked about before. It's another mini game factory, basically, this place. With like, there's the odd thing, like I like the weapon shop that you have to sneak into to talk to the guy. If you touch any items in it, he'll just get annoyed. I like the weird elements.
I don't think I saw that.
Yeah, there's one of the item shops. If you go in, I just ran in and there's a load of like boxes on the ground or something. I can't remember what it is, but if you touch any of them, he's like, he won't talk to you because he hates noise. So you have to like really carefully walk through.
That's a nice touch. It's a nice touch. Like, and again, it calls back to what I was saying before. They sacrifice some of the drama for something that's kind of wacky, and like, it's not completely terrible, but it's hard to get on board with that when like I was so invested in the original.
Yeah, that's something is lost.
Yeah. So as you said, there's a lot of mini games here. Like, probably not going to focus on a lot of them, but we do have to mention the fact that there's a battle arena here. I think it's really strange they have a battle arena here when there's the battle arena literally in the gold saucer, like directly above. Yeah. Why do they have two battle arenas?
Like, I guess thematically it makes sense for there to be like a fight club down in this place because it's so like grimy and scrappy, etc. But I thought the exact same thing. I was like, why is this here? And it makes it inconvenient more than anything.
If you're like, okay, I'm going to do all the battles now, you have to jump between the two. I mean, it's not a huge deal. It's close, so that's fine. And the original game did this as well, technically. It had the battle arena in Wall Market and also the computer-generated things, like, what was his name?
Oh,
Chadley's thing.
Yeah.
And that was kind of okay, because, again, I think it was all about theming, really, because one of them, as you said, is kind of a fight club kind of thing, whereas the other one is more like, this is like the really ridiculous stuff. We can't justify it just being hanging around, so it has to be computer-generated stuff. But yeah, I don't know. It's again, thematically it makes sense, but from a gameplay perspective, it's just really weird. And as a result, I kind of forgot about this battle arena by the end of the game.
Yeah, me too. I actually didn't know that side quest that you mentioned earlier because I just went down to the battle arena once and did like a few matches and then left it and never went back. Just one mini game to point out I really liked from Remake was the box one where you have to
it makes a return here.
And it's still really fun. I don't think they explain a lot of the mechanics very well in it. The ones that you have to hit with a certain weapon or you have to unlock another box to be able to destroy that box. Is something I only got after like playing through it a few times, but it's still a fun mini game.
It's this whole thing with this game is like every single mini game, like by itself, could almost be like it could be like a Super Nintendo level game. Like, it's got enough mechanics going on in every single one of them that you're like, this could almost pass off as its own little mobile game or something. Like, it's that deep, but because there's so many of them, they're just overwhelming, and you don't really want to spend too much time with every one of them. So you just feel like you're wasting your time a little bit with each one.
I sort of felt not guilty, but like, I did feel like the classic thing of, I'm ignoring the world in peril to go collect, I don't know, to go fishing or whatever you do in most other games. I did feel a bit of a pull in several different directions, which is not what you want.
But on that note, so Gus basically says that he will let his prisoners go if you can pay him a shit ton of money, which he says you can get by winning the Chocobo races. So you have to go around. What's his name? Choco Billy is here again, and you're introduced to Esther. From the original game. Esther, I remember a very big deal was made in the original game of her looking funny. And I'm trying to understand, like, the new design, I basically think that just means she wears pink, and that's weird. Like, she's got big dress. Like, I don't know what exactly they mean when they say she looks funny, except that she wears bright colors.
She did stick out a lot more in the original Desert Prison because everyone else was in like black and grey and was like downtrodden and grimy, and she was in this like luminescent like neon pink square basically. But yeah, it doesn't really translate in this one. Well, I don't think they draw as much attention to it now.
They don't draw as much attention this time around, and like she was kind of a nothing character. I had nothing really to say about her really at all. She floated in and out of my mind very, very quickly. But Chocobo Racing, what did you think of Chocobo Racing? This is the first time we've actually done a Chocobo race in this game. What did you think of Chocobo Racing in Rebirth?
Well, it's certainly better because, like, I don't know if it's a controversial opinion to say, but it fucking sucks in the original. I think.
No, it does. It does.
It's really bad for such a like famous part of it. I love all the busyness around it, like the area you're in and the little rival jockey they set up, and the way like it ties in. Of course, it's this game. It ties into like side quests and unlockables and stuff like that you can do. The racing itself was grand. It's like the other mini games. Like it's pretty serviceable. It could be its own game, but I don't think it would be a good game if it was its own game.
I think it's a solid C grade game as it is. It's quite polished. It's just that there's nothing really enticing you to come back to it again and again. And this thing is like it's so much more in depth than in the original game. So it's there's loads of stuff that you can win, but none of it again really feels that important. At least there's nothing. The only thing that I liked, there was I can't remember how I unlocked this, but you can unlock a robotic chocobo. Like it's just like a robot chocobo, and it has really, really good stats. I have no idea how I unlocked this thing, but that was kind of cool. That was just kind of a nifty thing to see. It's better than the original. Not really particularly difficult to do that, and like I enjoy it well enough. As I say, I think it's C plus kind of game, and that's about it. So, yeah, it does its job.
Yeah, it is. It could have been a lot worse, is what I'll say. Because I've played many games that have these sections, and like their approach to vehicles throughout has been pretty good. I guess the bike racing was in remake, and the motorbike sections were in remake, and I really liked them. So they knew what they were doing with vehicles in general. Yeah. But, it's pretty good, I have to say.
Yeah. So in Cloud, he beats Chocobo Race, comes back down, pays for his friends to be released, and Gus basically grabs his crotch and directs you over to a pipe and says, right, the guy who shot up the gold saucer is down there. Do with him whatever you want. So you go this way, go into the desert, and this is when you come across Barrett, and you ask him, hey, what's the dealio? What did you do this? And he explains the backstory of what happened with dying. Now, this bit is probably the part of Remake I was looking forward to more than any other part of the game. I love this section in the original game so much. It's one of my favorite parts of the game because it's so emotionally charged. It's a really dramatic, tense moment. And they do a good job with this up to a point.
Yeah.
And I think you know exactly what I'm going to say here, right?
Well, now we're specifically talking about dying and the confrontation there rather than
not
the section around it.
Yeah, the backstory. No, the backstory is great. I'd say not like, holy shit, that was amazing, but like they pretty much do exactly what they wanted to do. They show here's dying, getting angry that they're giving up their coal mines, and they show the section where this might be happening later in the game, but we might as well explain it now. Where Barrett and Dine go to check on the reactor, and that's when they find out Shinra come in and shot everybody up in Mount Coral. And this is all fine.
At this point, they have that flashback.
Yeah, and then they find Dine tied up in the middle of this kind of little arena type place. This is really good. The fight scene between Barrett and Dine in the original game, always felt a little bit flat because it was turn-based. So it was just two guys standing opposite each other, shooting, potion, shooting. They do a much better job with the battle in this one because it's an actual firefight.
And you have to take cover, and his moveset is expanded as well, and they use his gun very well. And I think I quite enjoy when you have to do a solo battle in these ones. I have to say it's a nice change up, and you're completely right. It works a lot better because you're by yourself and it's not turn-based. I love the turn-based system from the original, but it's better when you're making tactical decisions using different party members rather than like just reacting and healing yourself and attacking and healing yourself. You tend to get into that sort of rhythm when you're by yourself because no one else can heal you.
Yeah, in particular, in the original game, when you have a party of 3, obviously turn-based is completely fine. But when you're reduced down to one character, it does tend to just be attack, heal when you need to, attack.
Yeah.
So soloing any boss in the original game always tended to be a little bit dull. Rufus was another good example of that in the original game, where in the remake, he was brilliant. One of the best fights in the entire game. It was really
good. Yeah.
So this game is particularly good whenever they do solo bosses.
Like the Roche one with Cloud actually is really good. In Junin, I really enjoyed that fight as well.
Yeah. I also really liked how they play up Dyne. He's literally, I think they say that he has Mako poisoning at one point or something. Like he's gone funny in the head basically, and this is all tied up not just so much with like trauma, but like deep personal emotional impacts that have happened on him. He's really a broken man in so many ways, and this is really effective because you can see that when he's attacking Barrett, he's kind of friendly, but then he gets confused, and then he's getting angry with stuff that happened in the past, and that's encroaching on his view of the present. He's just like a really, really confused, angry guy. So when he's lashing out, you can feel how bad Barrett feels for fighting him because he knows he's not well, and he just doesn't have a choice really than to fight him. And when you defeat him, holy shit, this moment is great. Now I miss the that image of Dyne just jumping off the cliff behind him, giving himself up because he knows he can't be a fit father. I really miss that, but they do a pretty close to stellar job here when he just basically dies in Barrett's arms, and Barrett's reaction to this is incredible, I thought.
Yeah, it's basically, it still is suicide. It's suicide by cop is what they call it in America, I guess, is where you're like, I'm purposely going to get shot up here. One thing I will say about this whole scene with Dyne is I do think the dialogue's a little overwrought at times, and maybe there's a bit too much of it. It could be a little more succinct because the music's quite good, but it's really hitting those heartstring notes in a way, and it was very close to tipping over into overly melodramatic. There is an element of melodrama with everything in Final Fantasy, of course, but like this was close for me. But like I thought I mostly did it really well. One thing I really loved was Barrett's gun being taken off his arm.
Yes, I love that.
Was really effective, like on the nose metaphor for what he's feeling and displaying vulnerability. But
again, it's really over dramatic, but it works for that scene so well. But then, unfortunately, just like when it's at a really fantastic moment, they basically fuck it up. After this, Palmer shows up in some kind of weird robot thing, and in my opinion, completely destroys the emotional atmosphere that they work so hard to build, and it turns it into this really ridiculous section where I think it's an on rails thing, isn't it? Like I can't remember. Do you actually fight him as well?
No, you do fight him.
You fight him as Cloud,
I think.
Yeah,
and then you do the on rails thing. The thing about first of all, you're completely right because it destroys the tone. And
because Palmer's a comedy boss. That's the thing. Like if it was another boss, whatever, like that could complement it quite well. But the fact that it's Palmer who historically has always been like the joke character, and there's all these jokes at the end, and it's like, what are you doing? This is like one of the worst mistakes you could have possibly made.
What they needed to do there, because they knew they needed to change, they needed to have some sort of change there, because you can't keep that sort of emotional intensity going. What they needed was a quiet moment.
Yes,
afterwards.
exactly.
Like a slow, like if they made your party just walk back to the desert prison, that would be really effective. And maybe there's some character dialogue where Cloud or Tifa says, "Are you okay, Barrett?" And he like mumbles something, and then you sort of let it dissipate and you let the players sit with, like, you know, fucking Shadow of the Colossus, where like there's these long stretches of sort of, you know, relatively simple gameplay for you to process what's just happened in the game. Instead, they're like, oh, we need to get the player back into a happy mood, so we're going to throw the wackiest fucking villain in some stupid mech. And like the on-rail section's so bad.
Yeah, well. I really didn't enjoy that.
It's one of the worst of those type of things that happens in the game.
It does that thing that some really bad on-rail sections do, where the camera is constantly shifting your aiming reticule with it, so it's really hard to actually aim. That makes it, because it's so awkward to play, it makes it obvious that you're just going around in a circle. Like you're going around in a really short circle on that map, and because you begin to recognize the landmarks around you, so it just becomes like, okay, when am I allowed to finish this, rather than I'm really excited to be engaging in this. And another thing that I found really just almost offensive was at the end of it, you're graded on how well you shot people, because you turn to Cloud and says, "How'd I do?" And he's like, "Oh, C+." So it's really obvious that it's possible to get like, a really good score or a really bad score. And what annoys me so much about this is no matter how you do, if you do amazingly, if you do terribly, if you do mid, there's no appropriate answer to that. There's no appropriate way to kind of sync that up with what happened before. If you did amazingly, it's kind of like, yeah, I'm a badass. It's like, well, that cancels everything out. If you do terribly, it's kind of like, okay, well, that's just, why are you focusing on that instead of the big dramatic thing that happened? Actually getting the midpoint, which is what I got, where he's like, oh yeah, C+. And he's like, yeah, well, I'm having a bad day. This is the closest it gets, but it turns into quippy territory. And it's just really frustratingly tonally inept. So I was annoyed by that. Just going back to what you said before, what I would have done in this section is literally have it so that the buggy is like a mile away, and have a walking section, and you control Cloud, and rather than saying like going up to Cloud or going to Barrett and saying, "Are you okay?" like you have a prompt to go up to talk to everybody, but every time you do, it's just like ... no talking. That would have been my thing. And like you can continue to do this the entire way to the buggy. You can attempt to talk to people, but no words come out. That's what I would have done. And I think that would have worked much better than this.
And like, don't to dwell, let's move on from this in a second, but like, why did we need Palmer there? Was there some story? Did they get something from us, or?
Do you know what I suspect it was? And doesn't justify it. I hate this, but if you remember in the original game, we have a boss fight with him in Rocket Town. And because Rocket Town doesn't show up in this game, we don't really know what the deal with that is yet. I think maybe they were like, well, there was that funny boss fight with Palmer in Rocket Town. We better find another way to insert that in here. And they just put it in one of the worst places they could have possibly
completely unnecessary as well. Yeah. Okay.
One other very quick thing I want to mention before we go on to the next chapter is we have a point where we flip over to Rufus kind of dwelling in his office, and he's, you know, saying his usual broody stuff like, "Where's the ancient? Where's the ancient? I want to watch the ancient." Blah, 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 blah. And what's his name? Glenn shows up again. Now we mentioned Glenn before. He Clyde.
What the name?
Yeah. But he shows up in Junin chapter, and I think at that point we were like, who the hell is this guy? So I did a little bit of research on it. Turns out he is a character who showed up first in this mobile Final Fantasy game, Battle Royale fantasy game I hadn't heard of, but then he's one of the main characters in The First Soldier, which is that weird Battle Royale mobile game, or maybe they're the same game, I don't know. But
I don't think that Battle Royale game exists anymore.
It doesn't. Well. It doesn't. That's the thing, and it's interesting to have him here because this I think this might have been a mistake on their part, where they're trying to like encompass every single game or movie or whatever that ever existed in the Final Fantasy VII universe and trying to represent it here. But nobody knew who Glenn was because nobody played that game. And he's just that's who he is. He's kind of interesting enough. I think they might try to do something more with him in the next game, but again, it's much like Roach in the previous game, where we were like, we'll have to see what happens in the next game. I think that's all we can really do here.
Yeah, and like, they tend to get it right more than they get it wrong with these things, so I'll give him the benefit of the doubt. But yeah, from the moment he showed up, I was sort of like, what nonsense is this? Don't fuck this up. Like, why? But listen, it's the two sides of the coin. For everything they nail, you got to take the occasional thing that doesn't really work.
Yeah. And hey, listen, on that note, something that they did that I do think really works is at this point you get the buggy. And the buggy is tons of fun. It's loads of fun to drive around the buggy. I really like the buggy.
Yeah, it's nice because it's faster than walking. So I was worried that, like, because when I first realized, you're going to just have it in this one area, basically. I thought, okay, well, are you going to just not use it because it's awkward to get into a vehicle? And like, it is slightly awkward to get in and out.
Sure, yeah.
It's still loads of fun. And like, there's a lot to be said for how tactile it feels. Like it spews up dirt in its wheels as it's going around, and it sounds loud. And I'm glad they included it as well. To get around this area. This area in general, though, is probably the most visually boring open world section in the entire. It's all like grey sand, basically.
Yeah. But I think they kind of offset that a little bit because they have one of the most visually interesting things happen here with the Gilgamesh side quest. He, as we mentioned before, he has a section in every single map in the world, and here he shows up as this enormous sand giant, probably the biggest moving thing in the game, maybe apart from, I don't know, maybe the weapons, but we don't see them in like gameplay. So it's really, it's kind of unfortunate. We might as well address this here because I don't think we'll need to go. We might forget about it later, but it doesn't really pay off, which I find a bit unfortunate. Like you don't
because I didn't get to the end. I encountered him a few times, but then I think I couldn't find him again, or maybe I was meant to go back later in the game, but I never finished it with him.
So I went back to try and do. I think. I must have did it. I remember I unlocked the final Gilgamesh boss. I just never fought him. But you never fight the sand giant or anything. He's just there wandering around as a visual quirk. And I guess, see, it's because when you see that, the first thing I think everybody is going to think is, oh, that's going to be cool to fight. And the fact that you don't get to fight it just kind of, it's a bit anticlimactic. Like it's again, it's a cool visual image. It's just, it doesn't pay off very well, which is unfortunate.
It is very cool to see it randomly appear though, and you hear his voice and the way he sort of dissolves back into the sand as well. I thought was very cool. But one other thing I want to mention is the other quest here where you're going down into those reactors and you're doing the cactar. Minigame. And like that minigame's whatever, it's fine. Like I didn't love it, but like I did enough of it to get by, basically. But you meet Kid G, right? And
Sonic the Hedgehog in Final Fantasy.
When I first saw him, I burst out laughing. I never do that when I'm playing a game. Yeah, because he reminded me so much of, and for the video version of this, I'll put it on screen. I don't know if you ever saw that comic online of Dobby with like drip on him from Harry Potter.
No,
it's this comic where the whole thing with Dobby from Harry Potter is he gives him a sock and then like he's free, so he gives him the sock or whatever, and then in the last panel he's wearing like pretty much Kid G stuff, like cool guy, like a Supreme top, and like he's smoking a joint and he's got the woolly hat on and stuff like that. And I was like, this is You're taking the piss now, Square.
Well,
This is a
yeah,
ridiculous
they are.
character.
That's the whole point.
But this was like an enemy in the original. Wasn't there an
Yeah.
enemy who looked like this that you could fight?
Yeah, these were just like this typical goblins who it's funny because like there's an island it's literally one island in the original game that it's just Goblin Island, and you only fight goblins there. And the whole reason they exist is because the best chocobo breeding nut in the game you can steal from them. And that's the whole reason for them existing. There's no other reason to go to that island except to do that. Except, if I remember rightly, you can also get an enemy skill from them. But yeah, that's the only reason. So, but you know what? I'm glad they included, because their design was so wacky that I'm glad that they found a way to include. I like this now. Don't get me wrong. Like, again, super ridiculous. And I was trying to check. I could have sworn the voice actor was the same as modern Sonic the Hedgehog, because that was he just struck me as modern Sonic the Hedgehog. That's what he sounded like to me.
We'll have to check that. Yeah.
But yeah, no, I just thought it was ridiculous, but again, in a good way.
If I didn't hate it, I have to say. It provoked an extreme reaction from me.
Yeah. So once at this point now, they kind of move on, and there's a point where they're like, okay, what should we do next? And there's a wee cutscene with Yuffie getting really car sick. Yay, little nod to the original. And Cat Sith gives another little reading, and this is very contrived, but basically in the reading it's like, your favorite food is mushrooms. C is for Catwoman. It's like that little literal Batman 50s Batman like solving riddles thing. So, oh, what a terrible riddle. Riddle. It's like that kind of like, logic putting it together. It's like, mushrooms. Hey, I know a place with mushrooms. Let's go here. I can't even remember why they decide to go to Gongaga. They just decide to go there. But yeah, that brings us into Gongaga, the Gongaga area. Now, before we talk about the map, I have heard people say that they hate this map.
Yeah, me too.
I didn't mind it, but I think a lot of the reason for that is I think this might be the best map music in the game. I love. Wow. Oh, did you not like it?
Our first fight.
Oh shit!
Oh
really?
What a momentous occasion! I fucking hated the map music on this.
Really?
I quite like the area, and we'll get into like why it works and why it doesn't. The open world area in general, but I hate it because it sounds like
new age
90s. What?
Like new age kind of like crystally kind of music. I don't know.
Exactly.
I vibed with it. I thought it was good.
I was impressed because it is that particular sound, and it sounded very expensive, if that makes sense, as in like it had a lot of elements that were recorded at a very high quality and a lot of work had gone into it, but I just found it so cheesy, really.
I'm a fan of cheese. Like, now this is the thing, so I was okay with it, but I can understand that. That's completely fair. Very easy to understand someone who doesn't like that kind of stuff. I vibe with it though.
But what did you think of the open world area in general?
I liked it about 90% of it. There was one or two. I remember there was one point. There was a tower that I was trying to get up to the top of. And to get up to it, you needed to jump on like 2 mushrooms in a row or something like that. And it took me forever to find the right mushroom or vine or whatever it was. So basically, like, this just makes map traversal a little, it kind of bottle ends the way to travel around. Whereas before, you can literally go whatever way you want and you can get to wherever you need to go just by heading in that general direction. Here, you kind of have to go to specific places to get to other places that are much further away because there's a vine connecting you to that part, and
there's no consistency in how far the mushrooms will send you ever. And so it means you can't really predict where you're going to end up, and like that's fine, but when you're trying to get to a specific place, it's very frustrating.
It didn't bother me too much because I didn't really have many problems with it, but I can 100% understand if people did get frustrated. I think it depends like how much searching around for specific stuff you're doing. Whereas I was kind of like, whenever I stumbled across something, it's like, oh, well, I'll just go get that now, rather than just like honing in on one particular thing.
I think it's visually like a really interesting looking place, and I like how different it is than the other environments we've been in, and the layout of it is very different because we've just come from like the flattest area in the game to Gongaga, which is the area with the most verticality in the entire game.
Cosmo Canyon probably has a lot more.
Yeah, that's true, actually. Well, it seemed this area is very layered, as in there's lots of paths that go over other paths and things that are snuck under ones, etc. And I appreciate that every area feels very different in their layout. They're not just like, oh, let's put the desert texture on a big flat plain and then we're done. That's Cosmo Canyon. But it was like a little awkward to get around. And the map is very hard to read in this area as well because there's so many of those little paths and all going underneath and over each other. But like, yeah, I don't agree with the overall sentiment from people like it's horrible to be in or anything.
Yeah, I guess it depends like how fast you're kind of going through the area. And I don't know. I mean, there's one... we'll come to this a little bit later, actually. At this point, when we get to Gongaga, one of the first people we meet is Cisne. And this, I remember when I first saw her, I remember thinking the way the camera is moving, the way she's being introduced, the way they're reacting to her, I was like, I'm supposed to know who this is. And I just had no idea for the longest time. And then someone mentioned it, like my brother mentioned to me, it's like, oh yeah, and it was nice to see Cisne, nice little callback to... And so it turns out, and I should have remembered this, she was a character from Crisis Core, the game with Zack on the PSP.
Okay.
She was kind of like his primary like information assist character, like the Mei Ling of Zack, in that game. And she... I remember her being okay, but she obviously didn't leave a massive impact on me because I didn't remember who she was. I think the name more than anything else, because it was such an odd name, and I was like, I feel like I've heard that before somewhere. But I liked her as a character. I thought she was pretty good. Again, more so like for her role than her actual personality. Like I like the fact that she's someone there who's actually organizing people, and like she gave more context to Gongaga as a place, whereas in the original game, like it's just a little village and there's not really much to it than that. I kind of missed that a little bit, but again, I think what they did here was decent. I didn't hate it.
Yeah, I felt like I sort of got the impression that the developers felt they couldn't leave an area simple. Like they had to expand everything in an area and make sure there's XYZ to do there. And that's cool and all. Sometimes it didn't need it. But like, it does mean you get interesting characters or like nice moments. Like I really enjoyed the chicken mini game.
I was about to bring up the chicken mini game is amazing in this.
It's really good.
For those who don't play, I mean, this is a spoiler, but this entire podcast is a spoiler. But the way that ends is basically you bring a chicken, like, this old woman is saying, oh, I've lost my chickens. And it's like, this is the kind of stereotypical side quest that's in so many other games that you think nothing of it. So you're like, okay, fine, I'll get all your chickens. And then when you collect it all, it says, oh, brilliant. Now I've got dinner. And it's just like, it closes in on her and gets dark and it's very obvious she just eats all the chickens. And it's like, what the hell? So it's very, very dark, but I love that bit. I thought that was excellent. There's also a really nice bit that I like when everyone's split up and kind of gone off to do their own thing. And you find Yuffie lying on the couch and singing basically her own theme song from the original game, but like she's added words to it. And I liked this song. I thought this was really good too. But probably the biggest story beat, well, not the biggest story beat, but one of the more interesting story beats here is we get to meet Zack's parents. Actually meeting them, I didn't really feel much of an effect from that. I didn't feel like very affected by this scene, but that was okay because I didn't feel that way in the original game either. I did like afterwards the little exchange between Cloud, Aerith, and to a certain extent Tifa.
Yeah.
That I liked because that had layers to it. That was very emotionally complicated, that scene, and I think they pulled it off pretty damn well.
Yeah, they can really surprise you sometimes that like maybe subtle is not the word, but more subtler at times. They can be about things like things being conveyed in performance rather than just being stated outright a lot of the time as well. But maybe it's because like you're playing through the game and you're so used to someone being very, very broad with their emotions and like shouting them and screaming to the sky that, when someone is a bit more subtle, it sort of shines through. Yeah, I agree. I did like that exchange.
And the direction is really good here because it's at this point, it's very obvious that anyone who's playing this game, they expect them to be familiar with the original and the general story of Final Fantasy VII. So we all know what the deal with Zack is. We all know the deal with Cloud and his relationship with Zack. So it's kind of a nice, kind of a shocking moment where he kind of turns around and says, screw that guy. And then like goes on to say, like, listen, if he hasn't like called you or anything yet, he's probably dead. And then he just cuts off where his head kind of goes a bit mad. And that was like a really good moment. And I'm not sure how much I liked it when he says, screw that guy. Aerith and Tifa have this moment where they look at each other and then they turn and kind of glare at the screen. I don't know how much I liked that. It was a bit anime cartoony, and I think they could have done something a little bit better. I think they could have, continued in that like emotionally complex line, but you can't have everything. It was like a solid 90% like kind of cutscene.
Yeah.
Although I have to say, at this point, it was around this point, or maybe Cosmo Canyon, where I started to really get sick of Cloud clutching his head like it was the exact same motion every single time.
Yeah,
and I was like, Jesus, man, would you just take an aspirin, will you, or something?
I've seen a lot of people say that actually about Cloud in this game. I didn't as much, I have to say, but like it's I don't have any counter argument.
It's not like the worst thing in the world. It's just a little thing that I was like, lads, would you just... They fall back on it so often that I was like, I feel like I wouldn't even mind if they just change the gesture, because he always does the exact same "ow, my head" thing, I don't know.
And it's an unsubtle way to signal that as well. It would be cool if they did it in more subtle ways, like if Cloud like started talking about something and then Tifa had to correct him and say, no, you weren't there that day.
Yeah.
I know she wouldn't do that about the Nibelheim incident, but if it was something a bit more innocuous that he'd mixed up with Zack, and then he shook his head and he was like, oh, sorry, yeah. Like they did like more subtle cues towards that. It might be more interesting.
So at this point now we start to hear, oh, hang on, you might have to help me a little bit on this one, but I think we just hear that there's like people there, you can hear explosions or something over at the reactor. Is that what happens? And
don't they come to, and Cisne says there's something going down there, and you have to split your party in half. So one half goes there and one half stays back at the village to protect everyone.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. And this bit, like, so one thing I wanted to mention before is this is the point where I really like the map of Gongaga, because you get this sense of like urgency when you're trying to get to the reactor, and the mushrooms and the vines really help sell that, because you're traveling really fast by chocobo to get to this place. So at this point, I thought the map was great. I loved the layout of it, and it really assisted towards that. When you get to the place, there's a boss that we fight, which is, oh God, I didn't actually check it now, but I think at this point we meet, it's a boss that was originally in Hojo's lab
I can't remember this at all. Like maybe it's a side boss and we're just conflating it with the main one, but you're basically going through and defeating monsters with Cloud, Barret, and Red, I think.
Yeah, and like it's nothing really big for the time being, but then of course Scarlet shows up in her helicopter mech thing, and that's when we cut back to the rest of them and saying like, oh, we need to go help. This is a very anime thing where they're just kind of like, why did we stay behind? We should be helping them. And then they just like, and it's literally just an excuse to split the party up. And then when they like, basically it's the exact same thing. Those guys follow them and they go to the reactor, and we have this big mech fight. I quite like this fight, I have to say. I thought it was really, really good.
Yeah, I can't remember now. Does she summon support enemies during this fight as well, or you're fighting other enemies at certain points. Maybe I'm mixing up with different fights.
So the fight beforehand, when she summons like the weird Hojo specimen thing, like that's like she arrives first, summons all these things to attack you. But then when the others come in, she basically is in her little mech thingy. And you fight them with that. And the mech thing also, I don't know if you noticed, but like looks very similar to the Proud Claude.
Yes, it does.
I think they're trying to. Now, this was something that showed up in the in Remake as well, the Pride and Joy prototype, which is basically the Proud Claude with a few things missing. This one also looks like it. It looks like it might vaguely be designed on some of the original weapons. You know, like it looks a little bit like Emerald Weapon, but it's red. So I don't know. Like it could be anything. But anyway, at the end of this, the fight is interrupted by another weapon showing up. I think we mentioned in the last podcast we weren't mad about the design of these weapons.
Yeah, I think you had more of a problem than me. I'm holding out hope that, you know, the original weapon designs are still there and they're just holding back on them until
I am as well.
Third game.
I'm terrified that's not going to be the case. And if these are the only weapons that there are, I'm going to feel like it's a big missed opportunity.
No, there's going to be like a 20-minute cutscene explaining how these are the native weapons, but the other weapons were created by something aeons ago, and they're distinct from these, and they give them like another name. They call them Uber weapons or something. I don't know.
Omega weapons, something like that. I could see it. I could see that happening, and that's why I think it's important to be vocal about this kind of stuff, because you know Square Enix is going to listen to this podcast
yes,
and they're going to hear
notes.
Yeah, they're going to hear how people like don't like this. Yeah, it's just they're just so generic looking. This now one thing I do like is when it does show up, like they do really emphasize the size of the thing. Like it's really, really big. But that's it. That's the only thing that I really liked about that. But yeah, then there's a whole thing where Tifa is kind of separated from the rest of them, and she goes like chasing after Scarlet, kind of emphasizing the slight rivalry they have, which I really hope pays off in the third game.
Setting up the slap fight.
Yeah, I really, really hope that shows up. And while she's doing that, Cloud is going on an absolute murderous killing spree. Now, this bit I liked. This bit I really liked. This is something that was hinted at in Remake when he looked like he was going to kill Johnny.
Yes.
And, you know, Tifa kind of stopped him. And here, it's kind of, she's not there to stop him. And he really brutally kills a bunch of people. In particular, there's a soldier who attacks him and he just like stabs him, flings him away. And then he goes up to it again and he just points his sword downward and stabs him right in the middle. And a load of blood just splatters on his face. So it's quite brutal compared to everything we've seen so far. We can see here, he's at this point, he's a killer. And that's pretty damn dark in this game. This is something that wasn't really touched upon in the original. So it's something that I really like. I think that's something that they've done really well in this game.
Yeah, it's hopefully going to pay off more in the third one. Like this whole conflict he feels and being pulled towards Sephiroth and the darker elements. And it's nice that it's got escalated. Like they didn't just jump to this in the first game. They just hinted at it. And he always has this coldness about him. But like even little things like the comment about Zack and this, it's I did like it. And him, well, he eventually attacks Tifa and sends her into the live stream. That sort of was they didn't do too much, but was a nice little red herring about Tifa dying.
Yes, and I like that a lot because it, like you said, they don't overstate it. It isn't like set up to be like, "Ooh, we pulled the rug out from under you." It's just kind of like, "Oh, is this what's happening here now?" And it's good. I like this now. Like, and the scene afterwards, I think it was very, very possible they could have messed this up because it's a bit nonsense.
Yeah,
but I like it. I like this scene.
Yeah, no, I appreciate when they take time for. It's not character work, but it's because it is plot based and it is leading to something. But you know, taking the time for this sort of thing, and I didn't hate how it was presented. It was a little clunky, but yeah,
and it's how would you describe it? Like it's she basically gets like first of all, like she goes into the water and you think, oh god, she looks like she's going to drown, but then she gets up, she's okay. But then Weapon jumps out of nowhere and swallows her. And again, pretty terrifying in this moment. It's like a dream sequence, this bit, where she's in the belly of Weapon and she sees she's swimming in a shoal of other weapons. Yes. And then Sephiroth shows up and he just kind of he just slices the belly of the one that she's in, and it's kind of like, is he trying to hurt her or is he helping her at that point?
It's sort of setting up that there's going to be, because there's whispers as well, that there's going to be good whispers and Sephiroth whispers, which, like, I'm not going to lie, I'm not 100% sure what is happening.
It's funny how, like, in the original game, like, we were confused the whole way through, and by the end of it, we kind of got an idea what was going on. And in this game, it's kind of like, okay, remember all that confusing stuff, so remember that, because it's going to get worse. Because literally at this point now we've got two different flavors of whisper, and it's getting really close to, I mean, not even close, it is in Kingdom Hearts bullshit territory at this point now, where it's like
fully they've drank the Kool-Aid.
But again, it's not so bad. Like it's I can just about get a foothold onto it and like I think I get what they're going for.
Yes, again, that's the thing. It's they've only got their fingertips on the edge of the cliff and they're holding on, but the fingertips is enough that'll like get me through.
Yeah. And it is a cool cutscene as well. Like when Sephiroth just flies in and he goes in. And again, you don't really know what's happening here because it looks like he's going to stab Tifa. Because like he aims his sword and he almost hits her. But then like he kind of cuts the belly open and she's... And then he kills the weapon at this point. So like she's free and then she kind of wakes up. She can get out. So you really don't know what's happening, but it is cool to watch. So
I really like the flashbacks as well to her past with Cloud and those sort of visions she has while she's down here as well. I just thought, that was an interesting way, and it hints at that scene later on in the live stream towards the end of the first game where they do the reveal about Zack and Cloud. So I guess they're setting up that this is how this is going to be presented then as well.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, it's a bit whack, but like I think we're kind of on board with it. Like they kind of just about hold it together. So it's like fair play, guys, fair play. And around this point, because they're trying to make sense of like all this, because like they got mixed up with the live stream, they're kind of having an excuse to go to Cosmo Canyon because they're like, oh, this is like the home of planetology. We can understand the live stream better if we go there. Again, it's all very like, now that I think about it, that shark was pulling my leg. Ye gods, the Joker! It's literally that kind of logic again. So once again, we are giving a very tenuous reason to go to the next area. But before that happens, you need a way to get there because apparently it's not as easy to get to in the original game. We need to fly there, and that's when we meet Sid. So what did you think of Sid in this version of the game? I've seen a lot of memes for Hot Sid going around.
He definitely has that hot dad energy. All right. I'm glad. Wasn't he just like 30 years old in the first one or something? But they aged him up appropriately here, or he seems the same age, but like he's adequately rough and grizzled in this one, I think.
Yeah, I think I really hope that they can redo the Rocket Town section in the next game, because my favorite part about Sid is the way he's introduced in the original game, how he's just a grumpy bastard who swears up a storm. Like possibly my favorite line in entirety of Final Fantasy VII is sit down, shut up and drink your goddamn tea. And if they don't have that line, I'm going to be so pissed. But they're doing something different with him here. They're making him like really charming, like super charming. Everyone fucking loves Sid in this. And he and Barrett kind of butt heads, but in a much more playful way than in the original game. Yeah, he's fine now. I hope they expand more on him, but he's completely inoffensive at least. They don't do anything with him that I'm like, I hate that.
And I guess he's more central to the plot towards the end of the game. With like if they do the huge materia space thing at the end of the game. I do hope to do Rocket Town. I think they will, but given that they'll fucking expand any little thing from the last game or the original and turn it into something huge. So Rocket Town will probably be like 3 cities now. But no, I did like that, or I didn't like that some of the edges were sanded off him a little bit, but it was a nice surprise to meet him so early in a different context, I guess.
Yeah. And like it does make sense to me that they didn't show every single time, because you think about it, by the time you get to this point, the end point, the City of the Ancients, by the time you get there in the original game, you visited pretty much every single town in the game except for Icicle Inn. That's the only town that you haven't been to at that point. Everything, there's a couple of areas other than that, but that's the only unexplored area or town in the rest of the game. So it makes sense that they'd want some new towns for you to go to in the third game that you haven't been to before. So I think that's what they're going to do.
Yeah, no, definitely.
So fingers crossed they are able to tie his and Shera's story and his whole backstory with the rocket up in a nice, coherent way at that point.
What I predict is they'll do a really good job with the content of it, but the reason we go to Rocket Town will be completely stupid and tenuous.
Probably. So from here, we get to Cosmo Canyon. Now, this is a point in the game that I took a lot of issues with. I didn't like most of this part, which is a shame, because this is one of my favorite parts of the original game. First, just the area itself, the desert. When I first saw it, I really didn't like it. I was like, Jesus, this is just so much verticality. It was like everybody else's reaction to Gongaga. That was my reaction to Cosmo Canyon.
Yeah.
I grew to love it eventually, because it is actually a lot of fun doing the whole jumping around on the chocobos bit. But initially when I saw it, I didn't really like the design of it. But what was your opinion of it when you first saw it?
They did go very monotone in some ways, with like everything is just red, and that's like obviously hyperbole, but like it could have used some other variants. Like there's a scene later around when you're at the Cosmo Candle around the campfire, and it's night, and you see like the sky is destroyed with stars. It's like absolutely full of stars, too many stars. And
stars for days.
And it's beautiful. It's lovely. There's a nice contrast with the really dark bluish black and the stars in the sky with the like deep reds and the bright candle. Like it's one of the most pleasingly art directed scenes in the entire game. Cosmo Canyon during the day is just a bit bleached out for me. I do like some of the architecture, the way it looks, the architecture level, I should say, the way the canyon looks, the shapes in it in some ways. But like it's littered with those platforms for flying, and they look really ugly and they stand out quite a lot in it.
It's a problem that I think a lot of the game has, where they try to justify all the gameplay elements visually, and like it's all very gamified.
Yes,
and in the original game, like those concessions weren't really made. They kind of kept the world fairly consistent. There were usually like whenever there was a mini game or something, obviously like that took a bit of a swing to the left. Like you could see that when you had like the submarine mini game, or like the snowboarding thing where you see like scores on the top of the screen, stuff like that. But here, like you're always aware of the gamey nature of things. Like another way this crops up as well is when you see benches and the vending machines and the little book thing always together, all three of them always together at random points. And that always annoys me a little bit, much more than a big save point crystal did in the original game, because that was a bit more, innocuous.
It's abstract almost, the save crystal. It's almost like you can pretend it isn't really there. But the bench is, such an ordinary item.
I think you put your finger on it there, because like in the original game, all these weird elements are abstract, so it's kind of more for us than for the characters in the world. But in this game, they try to justify everything that's gamified as a real world thing, and that kind of cheapens some of the more dramatic bits. I'm complaining again about like kind of the lack of drama and emotional the emotional strength the original game had that is kind of like lacking in this game. And a big part of that. Sorry, I think you were about to say something.
Well, I was just going to say you're right to complain about that, because what it is, the way I felt it was more lack of overall immersion into the game.
Yeah.
And that's because the original has this visual cohesion because all the backgrounds are pre-rendered. So everything sort of fits and works together a lot more than this, where things like it's full of button prompts and different menus and things you can pick up and all like that. And like, I understand they had to go in a different direction, but yeah, no, there is something lost there. It's almost the same as like, there's something lost and something gained. You know, the RE2 remake, you lost the dramatic camera angles and the music, but you got the high fidelity graphics and the atmosphere of the flashlight in a dark room. It's a trade-off, what I was going to say.
And that's it. Like, sometimes you have to do that to kind of, for something to evolve. And again, the original still exists. So if you want that dramatic, the strength of like that, those emotional scenes, the original's always there. This is just kind of an alternative version, which is very much focused on gameplay. And to its credit, the gameplay is a lot better. But now we have to talk about, well, actually, before we get to the town, we have to talk about one of the most egregious changes they made in this game. And I remember sending you a message about this when I got to it. But at this point, Red 13, he realizes he's home and has a complete personality change.
Yeah.
I hated this.
Yeah.
I kept hoping this was going to be like a dream or something, that like it would just stop. Like, I kept thinking maybe, I don't know, but basically this is something that they've very strongly seemed to state that this is just who Red 13 is now. He's basically turned into a child, and this is his real voice. Apparently he was putting on the big serious voice that he's had up to this point, and this is his real voice. And I'm sorry, I hate this. Like, I understand the reasoning for it, and I'm like, fair, but I just hated that voice. I hated his voice so much, and I hated how whiny he became.
And, well, it's more he became really like G. Willikers, you know? He was just like...
Yeah.
And I guess he's meant to be this puppy. I looked into this, right, because I was like, this is such a bizarre change to make. Because they introduced him in Remake, and his voice was very well received, and... Me and you, even on the remake podcast, we say, well, they nailed his voice. That's exactly how I imagined Red 13 to sound. I looked into it, and I don't know how true this is because I don't speak Japanese, but apparently the way he's written in the original from 1997, they reflect that a bit more in the way he speaks and the type of words he uses. He speaks in a more informal way.
So... This is something that it feeds into the original game as well, because he has moments where you can tell he is speaking. It's much more apparent that in Cosmo Canyon, he has a moment where he says, like, I'm 48 years old. And Bugenhagen says, oh, he's barely a teenager now. And that is reflected, like, because he does use certain phrases, like when he runs out of the town, he says, like, what were you doing there? He says, oh, I think I grew up a little.
Yeah.
And he has moments where, like, I'm not afraid of Sephiroth. Not really, you know, and he does, like, he's trying, it's basically trying to convey that he is not this wise old elder battle hardened like warrior. He is kind of a kid. And I get that, but this is just not a good way to go about it, because they've just changed his personality. That's all. They just replaced the one they had with a new one, and it's instantaneous and jarring and just terrible, really. I mean,
wait, no, you don't like it? Sorry, you're being very ambivalent about this now.
Sorry, just to clarify, I am not overtly fond of the thing. The thing is, right, they could have just done this in a very natural way. Is it a different voice actor?
No, that's the bizarre thing. I'm 90% sure it's the same voice actor, which is very fucking impressive for that voice actor, by the way. Like that's some range that person has. But
yeah, but misplaced though.
Yes, yeah. So are you going down the road of they keep the original or the voice that you had in remake, but just have him like act a little more immature?
I mean, they didn't have to change his voice. They could have just changed the way he talked.
Yeah.
Like, by which I mean, like, he could still keep the, oh, my name is Red 13, but you can call me Nanaki, blah, blah, blah. It's just, whoa, I'm not scared of Sephiroth. You know, they could keep the gruffness, but just, like, express in the way that the things he says that he is a bit more childish. Like, that would have been fine. It's just... in particular, during battles, he has this like wahoo kind of sound that he does when he does flips, and I just hated it so much. I'm not going to rag on it too much because I'm just going to keep saying how much I hate it. Just a really bizarre choice. I don't think there's any benefits to this whatsoever. Even if they wanted to keep that level of like, okay, he's become a little more childish, they could have just dialed that down a little bit. It was so jarring here that it just didn't work.
It was a huge change. They could have made it a little more subtle, but yeah, it did great throughout for me. Like I never got used to it.
Yeah. Hopefully they'll, I don't know, maybe they'll do something different.
He'll get a third voice.
Yeah.
He'll sound like a baby.
Yeah, so now this happens when he gets to Cosmo Canyon. Now, Cosmo Canyon, the town itself as well, I didn't vibe with this, unfortunately. To give you an idea how I felt about this place, right? Here in Kyoto, in Japan, there is a tourist spot which is like the oldest Starbucks in Japan. And it's like a Starbucks that's kind of old school, like old Japanese kind of building, but it is still a Starbucks. That's how I felt about this Cosmo Canyon. It's
a good metaphor.
It's like it's got the mysticism, but it's like a hipster's mysticism paradise thing. You know, like little things bothered me. Like one thing that really, really annoyed me is I could see there was a point where there's these tourists there with luggage just standing around saying, so like, where can we leave our bags? You know, it's like, oh, for fuck's sake. Like, it's a very deliberate thing. They're trying to make it look like a hipster's kind of place. Oh, I heard this place is so cool. I just didn't like that though. I think they could have kept it a bit more like wholesome. They didn't need this cynical view of like, oh, this can only be cool in like a fourth wall breaking kind of way.
Yeah, that's interesting because like I was about to say, oh, you realize like they're making this comment about like, I don't know, commodification of this ancient culture. And like, obviously you get that. And I did like that angle, but it did lose something as a result because it's hard to square that away with Bugenhagen being this all-knowing like prophet of the stars and the cosmos and everything like that when he's like essentially sold out. Like I'm not sure how deep the commentary goes other than, isn't it funny that we turned Cosmo Canyon into a tourist resort?
Yeah, and the idea of the like it's kind of like a college as well. Like they keep saying like, oh, one of the lecturers like had a talk with me earlier today, and like, oh yeah, we're having a little talk here now, and you can do this assignment. There's libraries, and I'm like, this just isn't for me. This is just really. It didn't work, like in my opinion. It's a nice, as you said, like it's a nice angle to take, but I don't think they pulled it off very well.
Doesn't Tifa go to one of the lectures and talk about struggles she's having? Am I mixing this up? And it's sort of like a circle.
No, they do talk about that, yeah. But I don't think that needed to be there because she has a similar confession that she has with Cloud later on, where she's talking about this kind of stuff, and that could have been conveyed there much more effectively. I don't know. It's to me, they're trying to get this message. I was like, oh, some places are sellouts, and as a result, the game itself kind of comes across as a sellout. So I don't know.
I have to say, one element that worked is the hotel design. The inn that you stay in is completely like one of those sanitized corporate places at a an area that has historical value, but they just make a chintzy hotel out of it. Like they sort of nailed that sort of aesthetic in there. But yeah, that doesn't override the entire feeling for the area, I guess.
Yeah. And I guess again, it goes back to the whole idea of this was one of those moments that was very emotionally effective in the original game, very visually stunning, very powerful. And here it just so much of that is detracted from it to again make it kind of a gamey hub area. So didn't work for me, kind of bothered me a lot, if I'm being honest. Also, didn't like the new soundtrack either for this one.
Yeah, it's hard though. Like the original is probably the best town music ever.
Yeah.
Like it's an amazing song. So yeah, it's pretty hard to live up to that. It didn't have the same impact. There's a certain, like, overall the music didn't gel for me as well in this game as it did in Remake, if I'm being honest. And a lot of stuff just got a bit sanitized.
Yeah. So this was kind of a very down part of the game for me. I was feeling very cynical about the whole thing. Now it does pick up again. We meet Bugenhagen, and I have to say I like him. I think they pulled him off really, really well.
Yeah. Was he quite as like grumpy? Not grumpy, is that the word for it? But like he can be short with people at times, saying, "Oh, you don't know anything about the cosmos," or something like that. He says to, I can't remember.
I don't think he was quite to that. I think there's a couple of moments where he says stuff like that, but I don't think as often as he does in this. But I think that worked for him. Like I liked his portrayal here. Usually when someone is held up on a pedestal in their original game and they're being reinterpreted, a lot of times like the new interpretation would probably try to show, oh, but this guy's human. And that tends to get bungled more often than not. It kind of ruins the original character. Here, I think they showed Bugenhagen's human side in a very effective way. Okay. I really liked how he's a little set in his ways, but he's still an authority on like all these things. So he knows a lot. And it's just like a minuscule flaw in his character where he's just quite stubborn about these things.
So then do we next go to Red 13's trial of acceptance or manhood?
Well, before that, and just to emphasize again, now you brought this up already, but we have the Cosmo Canyon.
Ah, yes. Yeah.
And as you said, visually stunning. And this is what I wanted out of Cosmo Canyon. This kind of, because again, it's a brilliant scene that you have where you get the opportunity to talk to all your party members and you have a little heart-to-heart with all of them. Really effective scene. Really, really good. And Aerith has a moment where she kind of tells everyone. It kind of has the vibe of like people dealing with like emotional trauma or something and like coming out like what's the word for that? Like a helper circle or something like that.
It's like a counseling session. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, it's not quite. It's like like kind of along the lines of like Alcoholics Anonymous or something, but like it's like a group therapy.
Yes,
that's it. It's like a group therapy session, and this almost fell flat, but because again, Aerith, she's like got like peaks and troughs for me in this game. Like she has moments where I really think she's very bland, but then other moments where her voice work is like amazing and she really sells. Like, and this is one of those moments where she really shines when she's talking about how she felt so isolated when like she always knew she was different and she always knew she'd never have a normal life. And it's really powerful stuff. Like it's I say on par with the original, because the original did a great job with this as well, and they had a lot less to work with. But I think they did a great job here of really showing how much Aerith appreciates her group. Like it really emphasizes how good the group dynamic is for her, and like how much that means to her.
Yeah. I like that they bring attention to that. I wouldn't have minded a bit more of that throughout it. I think maybe I'm conflating that with an overriding feeling I have about how much you get to hear from Aerith throughout the game, and I feel like she gets a bit overshadowed when really more of the game should focus on her, but that's maybe a different point for towards the end.
Yeah, I think we'll probably talk about that a bit more probably in the last episode, but I do agree with you there. I think it's very pointedly directed that way. Pretty much as a way of kind of, you know, pulling the rug out from under you. They want you to think certain things about this. So yeah, now we have the Red 13's trial by fire, and yeah, a very interesting decision here where he gets sent in with Barrett of all people. And at the time, now I have to say, gameplay wise, this works really, really well.
Yes.
The two characters complement each other really well. And I would even say they've got really interesting banter, but it's still a very odd decision. What did you think of this bit?
I think they've been trying to set up like a mini conflict between them that didn't really land, to be honest, throughout the game, as in saying, oh, they've been butting heads and now they're really going to meet up and, you know, see the value in each other. But I didn't really feel that enough from them before this for that to work in this moment. But as you said, they work really together. They were paired for me whenever I was swapping parties. I would generally have them together with Cloud. But what did you think of it?
Yeah, again, it's gameplay wise, like it's fantastic. They work really, really well together because their moveset complements each other very, very well. And the little kind of sniping back and forth, kind of, yeah, I enjoy that. It's a little fun little bit. It was just kind of niggling at me, thinking like, why did they choose this? Like, why not Cloud? Like, and this is the main question it kind of needs to be asked. Why not Cloud?
They say something stupid like, oh, it'd be too easy if it was you because you're a soldier or something. Doesn't Bugenhagen say something along those lines?
Yeah.
And like, I like when they split the party up in general throughout the game. And a lot of the time it's really contrived why they do. So like, I was willing to go along with it.
I just think I feel like they draw too much attention to it here. The fact that like, yeah, as you said, it's a very contrived reason to have different people. And as you said, they do this a lot. They find ways to kind of separate people and it's less noticeable, I think. Here, it's just they're really, really laying it on thick, saying like, okay, we're going to split the party up because I said so. So I think it's gameplay-wise, it works great. I think it's a great section. It's just you can't help but like it was poorly explained why it had to be split up at this point.
And you're completely right. They do literally like, not you, Cloud, you know?
Yeah, they literally say like, no, it'll be too easy for you. And when Barrett gets chosen, going back to what you were saying before, like Red 13 has this little moment of like, oh, do I have to have him? As if to say like, oh yeah, because they've been having little sniping matches the whole time. But again, the game is so big that if that kind of dynamic has been playing out, it's not noticeable amongst the sea of other interactions that we've already seen.
Yeah, it's like you're painting on a canvas that's 100 meters wide and you're like, oh, did you like that speck of blue I used there? And it's like, I can't see that. It's just too big.
Good analogy. Yes, bang on. But yeah, this it's a fun little section. I quite like the dungeon design here. I was a bit worried because this is another one of my favorite parts of the game. But no, I think they did a pretty good job here. It was linear enough. It didn't feel too sprawling and exhausting. It was fairly streamlined. And we have the boss against Gene Attack.
Just before that, what do you think of the wall running mechanic and the holding things in your mouth mechanic as well?
It was interesting. It didn't outstay its welcome, is what I'd say. Like I felt like I could have gotten tired of it, but it was fine. It was okay.
When you started doing that stuff at the beginning of the dungeon, I thought this is going to get fucking old quick. But yeah, they really perfectly managed that, I have to say.
Yeah. So you have this whole bit where you have to gather all these like special like things, red herrings basically to open a gate, and you get the Gene Attack. This boss was fine. I don't really remember much about it. I just remember it being fine. It wasn't annoying, wasn't too difficult, wasn't too easy. It was just
I found
fine.
this one a little tricky, if I'm being honest. Yeah, I had to use... I had often had times where one party member was dead. I think I just approached them in the completely wrong way in terms of my materia setup. Like, it was just like, I only took one go, but I don't think I died too many times in this game, to be honest. So I think I died a little more in Remake, if I'm being honest. but he was a little tricky for me.
Yeah. I think it was I got on fine with him now, to be honest, but it was just fine. But after this now we have a very interesting moment, and this is where things go back in the uptick. Here's where Rebirth kind of takes the reins a little bit and kind of takes some liberties with the story. Now, I love this bit. I thought this was a stroke of genius on their part. They basically expand the lore of the Gi tribe. They show the scene with Seto up on the cliff. Again, I don't think this is quite up there with the original because, again, with the painted backgrounds and the framing of it all, like it's so perfect in the original. It's not bad here. It's fine. But it just doesn't have quite the emotional wallop the original had.
And it doesn't help that you've got the young Red's voice in this as well.
Yeah, God, that was really bad, yeah. And I think even the fact that like Barrett is hanging around in the background, I think he makes some kind of snarky comment as well. I don't know. It was just it was fine. It wasn't offensive to me, but it just didn't play out as perfectly as the original did.
Yeah.
But so the Gi tribe, the lore of them is expanded. They seem to play a much bigger role in this game than they did in the original. They're kind of an analog for Native Americans, I think, with lots of imagery that kind of correlates with them. But yeah, no, they've got an expanded role here. After you see Seto, we see this boat that looks like it's going across the River of the Dead or something like that. So we think it's a jolly good idea to hop on that boat and go along with them for reasons I genuinely can't remember. But we basically learned that the Gi tribe, they're not like all bad. They're actually they're kind of cursed because they weren't born of the planet, so they can't return to the planet, which means that they are somewhat immortal and they can't die. And this is a fate worse than death, as it's kind of pondered upon. So this is the point where they reveal that there is a way for them to be released from the horrible grasp of life, and that's by something called the black materia. Now, I love this because I couldn't really tell you how the black materia gets introduced in the original game, but here it's really clear, really concise, and it has a reason for existing. It's, they want it because it's a way for them to actually die, and there's a really interesting moral dilemma happening here where the Gi tribe, basically they want the black materia so that they can kill themselves, but it's kind of hinted upon that but the black materia could kill everybody.
Yes,
so maybe if we give it to them, it might kill everybody. And the obvious answer one would think to that is, well, then just don't give it to them. But in doing that, you're kind of depriving these people any kind of reprieve. You're like forcing them to suffer immortality for the rest of time. So there is a moral quandary there that's really, really interesting. And I like that a lot. And I just think this is brilliant. This is one point where, again, Rebirth outshines the original, I think, because it just does a great job of explaining something that was really badly explained in the original.
And if a remake's going to do anything, that's it. Is like expand and clarifying things that maybe either got lost in translation or were oversights in the original. The main thing I did like this section as well, and the conceit that they set up. But one thing I was like, how are they going to resolve this? Because we're definitely not going to give it to them. It's not going to be a choice. It's not going to be anything like that. I think my prediction would be that Holy just fixes everything at the end, and it fixes them.
I think so. Yeah, that's the thing. Like, it's interesting enough that it's there, and even if it does get solved in that kind of Deus Machina kind of thing, that's fine. I think, honestly, just because the point of it is to get us thinking about these things, and I think it does a really good job at doing that. So, once they basically they're in this horrible like land of the dead kind of thing, which. Again, one thing I didn't like about it, again, something I mentioned before, as soon as you arrive, there's a bench, there's a book, there's a vending machine. And it's like, are you fucking kidding me? Yeah. Like, this is supposed to be like fucking Limbo or something, and they still have it. And I wouldn't mind, but like when I saw that, I was like, oh, well, there's probably a boss or something coming up. There's not. It's just a couple of regular fights. Yeah. And actually, it would have been better if they just got rid of the fights, got rid of all that, just have that as a small mini map where there's a bit of exposition. That would have been much, much better.
It's because they're too formulaic. We have to have a certain amount of combat every X number of minutes, and we can't let the player go without that for a while. And like, it would have been a lot of cutscenes to sit through because you just had the Seto bit at the end of Red 13's thing. But yeah, I do agree. Yeah, it seemed just like busy work.
Formulaic is a very good way of putting it. And like the formula becomes really, really obvious very early on in this game. And it's unfortunate because, like, you know, a few quiet moments, like high tension moments, like that kind of ebb and flow would have been really nice in this. But unfortunately, we don't really get it. Yeah, so you get out of the land of the dead, and Kate Sit basically. Now, this bit, I actually thought this was a fairly good transition. I thought they actually did this relatively well, where they're saying, like, how can we find out more about, like, the black materia? And it's like, oh, well, maybe I could access it with a terminal. And it's, oh, is there one here? Well, no, the closest one would probably be in Nibelheim. It's not perfect, but it's a lot better than, like, mushrooms. Huh, I know where there's mushrooms. Like, it's much
definitely better than that. Yeah.
Yeah, so, like, they do a better job of this time. And, yeah, so basically said, right, let's go off. We'll go back to the airplane where Sid is at and fly off to Nibelheim. So we're nearly there. And for anyone listening, I know this is long, but this is the last chapter we're going to cover before calling it a day. I hate to be this person now, but Nibelheim was another area that I was a little bit down on.
Okay, let me get my 2 cents in before you rag on it, okay? Nibelheim is... I said the desert was the visually, like, least interesting. Maybe Nibelheim is, because it's literally grey stone everywhere. But this is the best use of the Chocobo's traversal abilities. I thought this was really fun. I actually would have wanted a bit more of this, because all the other ones are very rigid. You go up to a wall with arrows on it, and you latch onto the wall, and you walk up it in Junin. Or you go up to the mushroom and you launch off it to a predetermined point. But you could just, like, burst up into the air out of water, like, at any point where there was water. And it was really fun to go around collecting things and, like, trying to find little ledges that you could go onto. Yeah, I really enjoyed that. I hope they expand that a little bit in the next one, but or try to make them all as intuitive as that. It was in Nibelheim. So yeah, this was actually the most fun I had going around an open world area in the game.
I agree, yeah. And it comes back to the idea of they favor gameplay above tone or story or anything like that. And fair, again, like, it is probably the optimum way to go about things, because again, the original exists. If you're here for the story, play the original. We're here to kind of emphasize the gameplay. It loses something, but at least it's fun, as you said. When we get to Nibelheim, though, one thing I did like is the fact that in the original game, they just say, like, oh, this is a town just been rebuilt by Shinra, and everybody is just there acting, basically saying, yeah, no, this has always been here. But this time, they acknowledge it straight away, and they say that this is kind of... a help center, or like a clinical testing center or something like that for all the black robe people.
Yeah.
I like that. I thought that was a nice touch because this is where a lot of the black robes kind of get concentrated. So it would make a lot of sense for this to be a place where they're being treated. So
I did like that, and I think that suits the type of storytelling this game is doing. I did like the sort of surreal element of the original, where they're like, no, there was no fire here, what are you talking about? It gets very like that, like the breaking of the line between reality and fantasy or dream. And like it being a bit like everyone's in a bit of a daze because of it, and you're just sort of sleepwalking through this town being like, wait, this isn't destroyed. But that maybe wouldn't have suited the tone of this particular telling of the story. And like you're saying, making it like a rehabilitation center or whatever for Mako poisoning really is a good reason to have a lot of black robes around.
And I'm kind of going to highlight the positive points before I really tear some of this apart. There are some good moments, like there's a nice side quest which I found very entertaining, where you have to follow some black robes a few places.
Oh yeah,
and you have the option to push them along, and this felt like a really douchey thing to include, because I felt really, every time I pushed them, I felt simultaneous like, haha, take that, and also I'm an asshole for doing that.
I just felt
it's like
good.
abuse.
I just felt like
it's just abuse of the infirm, like just going yeah. Yeah, so I do agree with you. I liked the surreal nature of the original game, how you just wander around and you're not really sure what's going on, and it's really throwing you for a loop. It felt kind of disconnected from reality and the rest of the world at large. Whereas in this one, it's more cohesive, but that makes it less memorable overall. There's one or two little bits I like, though. There's a really nice bit where you climb up in the water tower and Aerith is up there instead of Tifa, and you have a little talk with her. And I like that kind of like flipping the, famous, iconic memory of Cloud and Tifa up there, flipping it on its head and having Tifa or Aerith there instead. I like that. That was pretty cool. And I think at this point, Cloud also has a bit where he's talking to Tifa in her house about how Tifa is wondering, I wonder why my dad went to chase down Sephiroth. Like, what does he think he was going to do? Kill a world famous soldier? But, then I understood why. Like, he was going to do it no matter what. It's a really nice moment where she talks about how emotion can totally override logic. And as this game is coming to its climax, we see that kind of take hold more and more, where people are letting their emotions do the talking rather than their internal.
Yeah.
So I like that a little bit. It's kind of setting things up for the future. But now, so as I said, now we've already torn it apart a little bit, but I didn't really like the gameplay here at all. So first, the party split up. Yuffie insists on going up to the reactor because they have to turn on a switch or something to get the computer working in the town. Very contrived reasoning there. But I understood why they did it, because people would want to go to the reactor in Nibelheim. They wouldn't want to skip that. But the reactor section's really boring.
Yeah, especially since you've done it already, essentially. So yeah, you're retreading old ground. And I was exploring around, seeing if there's anything I missed, and there's a couple of things to do, but it's fairly boring. There's a
boss up here that weird variant. It's again that another iconic section where that monster bursts out of a pod in the original game. This happens during a memory. In this, they kind of recreate it, where a monster bursts out of a pod and you have to fight it. And again, creature design on this one was just very meh. I wasn't really impressed by it at all. It was just, this is just a slimy, goopy monster thing. It doesn't really do much. So the only thing that really interesting thing that happens here is while you're there, you find some soldiers from Wutai who are dead. And we'll talk about this a little later, but this ultimately leads to war being declared. And that bit, now we'll talk about that probably in the next one, but like that has some very interesting ramifications on the rest of the game.
It does.
Yeah. But yeah, anything else you want to say about the reactor bit?
No, again, it's retreading old ground, and like it was interesting having Yuffie there and seeing her reaction to Wutai, and like how that'll get expanded out was the only interesting part for me. And there's a conversation between Tifa and Cloud that sort of hints at Zack a little bit. Doesn't he talk about somebody getting swept away during...
Oh, that's right. Yeah, that actually, I forgot about that. But yeah, that kind of tells Tifa that Cloud does remember Zack. So she's getting more and more worried that he's going to have a bit of a mental breakdown. And you know what? I kind of like this because they're building up to this really slowly.
Yeah.
They're playing the long game on it. So I'm liking that. That all pays off very well at the very end of the game. But yeah, after that, we switch back to the guys in town, and they basically need to go. Why does it they have to go into Shinra Manor again?
The passkey. They need the passkey from someone who went missing. Is that it?
That was it. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Now, I really didn't like Shinra Manor. I think we mentioned this in the very first episode. Shinra Manor's design is terrible in this game.
It just becomes these grey corridors underground.
Really. Yeah. It's probably the closest equivalent we have to the drum from the original game, where it's just, and again, Hojo shows up again for no reason other than like he's there to be a dick and play with people.
Yeah.
So it's I didn't like this. I didn't like the fact that it was interesting at first when you get to play as Cat Sith and you got this whole box throwing thing. That was fun for one room.
Yeah.
And I hated it afterwards.
It was so annoying.
It made me super angry because the next boss battle I got stuck on, and you probably saw this, that there was some very confusing wording about when you try to quit out, when you lose a battle. There's some confusing wording about like, do you want to go back to the next battle or do you want to go before the first battle or previous battle? Basically, the wording was really confusing, so a lot of people accidentally clicked the wrong thing.
Yeah.
This happened to me at the next boss, and I accidentally deleted about 3 hours worth of progress, and I had to do the entire Shinra Mansion again.
Oh my God.
I had to take a break for about 2 days before I could bring myself to do it again. Because that bit was really.
Do you know, I thought I had a worse example than you, but you that's a big chunk to lose. I did it on the final boss fight in the game, which has like 11 sections. So I had to go back to the very start of that when I was like second to end section, maybe. But yeah, I don't know why they worded it that way. It was so I saw so many people complaining about that. The one redeeming thing, it's not even redeeming about this section, is I like the way Kate Sit rolls when he runs. That's the only thing I like.
This is the thing. I like Kate Sit as a character, and I like spending more time with him, but so much busy work in this section. Just like figuring out box puzzles, and you mentioned there's a bit where you have to fight a couple of enemies by yourself, and even though that's super difficult, I actually quite liked that bit. It was really challenging, but I hated it the second time around.
It's just because I don't like using him in combat in general, and like I know we've talked about there are ways to efficiently use him, but when it's just him, it's so tricky as well.
He is.
It was an annoying enemy that you fought as well. It was that guy that switched between magic and physical.
Lost Number. Yeah, he's a boss that in the original game, like, so a little side tangent here. In the original game, Lost Number was always the first boss I would get to who made me realize, okay, I have to grind now. I always got stuck on him. So anytime I played Final Fantasy VII when I was a kid, as soon as I got to Nibelheim, I'd start grinding outside for like about an hour or two before I went in. In this game, he's fine. He's pretty fun. I think he's okay. But I think, I don't know, like, I think he was a little bit anticlimactic.
Yeah, no, he has more impact in the original, definitely.
But eventually you get reunited with like Cloud and all them. Basically, you get out of the drum sciencey section of the Shinra Mansion and you meet up with Cloud. And this is the point where you meet Vincent. Now, I did not expect this. I was very surprised by this. But basically, Vincent gets a bit pissy about you going into the wrong room and you have to fight him.
Yeah.
And I love this. I thought this was great. This was I died on him a lot. He was a really hard boss fight and I really enjoyed it, actually. Did you die on him?
No, I didn't. I got him first time. It's weird. Our play styles must have been very different, that we struggled on different ones. But no, I like, he was a tough boss, but I think I got him first time. But an enjoyable one. And it makes me interested to see how they're going to use him as a playable character in the next game. But
what did you think of him as a character, just the way he's portrayed?
I liked it. He's more engaged. He's still a bit aloof, and I like that element of his character. I don't want that to go away, but he's a little more engaged. Like, he has dialogue and he'll give advice or his thoughts on something at several points. So yeah, I liked him, and I liked the voice actor as well. It's sort of like an easy role in a way. It's a little one note, especially in this game. Like, you might have to show more range in the next game, but no, I thought they did a good job.
Yeah, I personally think they nailed it, because it would be very easy to try and add a little comedy into his character, I think, because that's what they do with pretty much everyone in this. But I think they definitely had a goal with him that he's going to be just the mysterious character. And they played him very straight, which I liked. I was very on board with that. The only time I think he really had a joke was he had a whole thing about a cell phone or something where Cat Sith had to jump up and say, when was the last time you used one of these? And he just like hits something and he just kind of looks at him and is like, what the fuck? But he plays it how I'd hope he played it. He wasn't like, looking at the camera and saying, what a weird little cat or anything like that. It was like, yeah, no, he's just kind of like, that's a bit weird, but okay. So, I think they nailed him. And I was, after how terrible Shinra Mansion and the reactor was, it was nice to have that kind of nice uplift. And then again, we get another fight after this, and one I really, really liked. We get our last fight with Roach.
Yeah. I didn't think I'd say this, but I'm going to miss Roach if he's not in the next game.
Yeah.
He actually really came on board with him. I think it was replaying Remake before Rebirth came out that made me like, actually, now that I'm used to this guy, he's sort of amazing and entertaining, and like the insane connection, the like subtle homoerotic undertones in Remake that they really, really emphasize in this game. I really loved him, and I don't hate that like he's probably not going to be in the next one. I don't know what way they're going to go with it, but it's interesting to use him as a way to explore the effect that Mako poisoning has on soldiers and what happens to the Black Robes, basically, to expand that out a bit. But yeah, I love this fight as well.
Yeah, I remember when we were talking about Remake a bit, we had a lot, we were very concerned about Roach as a character because we thought, what's the point of this character? Like, what's he here for? But I remember we said in our most optimistic view was that he's going to have a role in like later games. And I think we thought that he was just going to be a constant rival from like first, second, and third. But actually they went one better. They actually have a valid story reason for him to be here because he is just almost comic relief at the start. You think nothing of him, which is exactly what they wanted us to think, only for him to have like genuine like emotional gravitas at the end when you see what happens to him, that he basically becomes a Black Robe. And it's really tragic because this is the first time not the first time we see the innkeeper from Calm. I think we also see he becomes a Black Robe.
Yeah.
But in this game, this is the first time we're seeing people becoming Black Robe characters. And, it's effective because even in the real world, this has parallels with aging, dementia, all that kind of stuff. So this is something that is always going to emotionally resonate. So this fight has huge gravitas, really, really. And it's a good fight as well. The fact that we have a scene earlier on where Roach is volunteering for Hojo's experiments because he wants to be able to, go toe-to-toe with Cloud. And it's a really good fight. He's really, really strong, really fast. It's very strategic because it's another one-on-one fight. All the one-on-one fights in this game, just amazing. And then when it ends, ultimately, it's just basically, because he loses, you can just see all the energy just draining out of his eyes and he just becomes a Black Robe. And it's really, really dark for Cloud as he realizes, oh shit, this could be what's going to happen.
Yeah, and I did this to him to a certain extent as well. I wasn't expecting this, to be honest, from this character. I was like pleasantly surprised that they took this approach with him, and yeah, I really enjoyed it. I think I will miss his insanity from the next game, that's gone. But no, fair dues, like they're going down an unexpected path with him.
And I think that's what makes it so impressive is the fact that he comes across as a joke character at first. So for him to have such a dark like fate in the end is really emotional, like because you just aren't expecting it. Like when one character is very obviously set up to be like, oh, something terrible is going to happen to this person, it's like, okay, well, I can see that coming a mile away. I didn't see this coming, so I was really impressed by it. I have to say, this is definitely one of the highlights of the game. But yeah, once that happens, once they get out, oh, hang on, we have to say, what was it they went into the Shinra Manor for? They were looking for stuff. Oh, they were looking for information on the black materia.
Yeah, and they had to get the key card to access the terminal.
Yes, yeah. And they do all this, and Kate Sith basically says, okay, now we have to go to Gold Saucer. Now, it's not until the start of the next chapter that he explains why, but basically, on the plane back, they're like, oh, yeah, he basically explains how Dio got his hands on the black materia. So Yeah, and when we go back, it's also revealed that Sid knew Aerith's mom. This was a bit weird for me. I'm not sure how I felt about this.
I don't understand. I guess it's a way to give more, to expand backstory or an excuse to do that, but it seems it's something that annoys me about things, media like legacy sequels and stuff, is that everybody has to be like the son of somebody from the last thing, or has to have known them from, like, why can't people just be a stranger who wants to work with us and that's the reason they get together? Like, I think the reasons he joins us in the original game are pretty valid and work in that context. So I guess
in the original game, I think you could argue his reasoning is kind of flimsy, because he's kind of just, I want to stick it to the man, so I'll go along with you guys.
Well, he's been like, he's a fugitive from Shinra at the point where he joins you. So I feel like he's like, okay, I'm going to go along, and then I think I'm filling in a lot of gaps here, actually, in fairness. But I was going to say he gets won over to your cause. I think that's inferred more than it is made explicit. But,
I guess in this game, because we don't have the Rocket Town section, we do need a reason for why he's literally at our beck and call for the rest of the game.
Yeah.
So I just think it's a bit lazy to kind of do it this way. I think they could have done something a little better. Again, it's the problem with legacy sequels. Like, I really don't like it. Like you said, when they just have everybody knows everybody, it makes the whole world feel small.
Yes, exactly.
But yeah, I guess, I mean, it's not the worst. I've seen much worse examples. So it's fine, I guess. It's a bit of a damp squib to end on for this chapter. But from here on in, things kind of pick up again, and they kind of keep going right up to the ending. I think Nibelheim was kind of the last part of the game where I kind of felt like, this isn't great. But from here on in, I think it gets pretty good.
I will have some quibbles with the rest of the game.
Okay.
Don't worry about that.
Well, I imagine if I know you, I imagine it's probably going to be the fact that loads of side quests open up. Is that?
We'll get into it next time. No, not necessarily. Not necessarily, but yeah, we'll get into it next one.
Okay. So, guys, that has been our talk on Final Fantasy VII Rebirth from chapters 8 to 11. So, just taking a fucking long time to get through this game. But there's a lot to be said. The next one will be our last one. We'll be talking about chapter 12, 13, and 14. So, Gold Saucer, and then basically the ending. And let's be fair, the ending is a biggie. There's going to be loads to talk about. So, while it looks shorter than the others, it'll probably be pretty expansive.
Yeah.
So hope you've enjoyed listening to us ramble on. To be honest, I don't think we really care if you did or you didn't. We're just here to kind of talk about ourselves.
We hate you.
We hate everybody listening to this podcast, especially you, Steve. People always use Steve as like for that go-to joke, so it feels really weird that my name is Steve.
Yeah, that's true, actually. It's like let's pick a common name that we can just fucking dunk on.
It's always Steve, right? Like, literally to the point, so many like SNL things always end with, God damn it, Steve. It's like, why do people hate me? Anyway, I've got a lot of anger issues here. So everyone, listen, thanks very much for listening. And follow us on the Cardboard Box Item on YouTube and Spotify. Give us a like, give us a review. Tell us, what did you like about this part of the game? What parts bothered you? Did you feel the same way as us about, Cosmo Canyon, Nibelheim, all these bits? Let us know in the comments if you're on YouTube. On Spotify, just give us a 5-star review. So thanks very much, and we will catch you next time for our last episode on Final Fantasy VII Rebirth.